Welcome everyone to the Lben Tea House. I am your host, Lben. First, I'd like to congratulate all the students who have just stepped out of the examination hall. You might already have expectations about your results, but remember, this isn't about 1 or 2 days' efforts. However, now that the exams are finally over, why not take some time to relax? For those who enjoy gaming, indulge to your heart's content, and those who love watching movies are in for a treat as well, with Wonder Woman and Pirates of the Caribbean currently in theaters. Consider finding some time to invite your classmates and relax together while watching a movie. Speaking of movies, I recall that as a child, I was very fond of watching films. But now, being busy, I rarely get the chance to go to the movie theater. The movies I watched in my childhood have a completely different style from today's films. They mostly centered around red-themed and revolutionary stories. Even now, when I hear the opening music of Beijing Film Studio, August 1st Film Studio, or Changchun Film Studio, I still get excited. So today, I will share with you a strange incident related to movies, about one of the top 8 haunted houses in the nation, the story of Changying Xiaobailu. The South has its pumpkin lanterns, and I've been to many places in the Northeast and North China, where several famous scenic spots all have one common landmark, Beilao, white buildings. Tianjin has a Beilao, Shenyang has one too, but today we're going to talk about the Beilao in Changchun. Perhaps in the past, there weren't many buildings with distinctive colors, so the ones with color stood out. Red buildings usually signify the owner's wealth, while white buildings often serve office purposes. As for Guanglu, green/blue buildings, I'm not too familiar with them, so let's not go into that. What we're focusing on today is Changying Xiaobailu. When people talk about Changchun's film industry today, they often think of Changying Century City, where you can enjoy various entertainment options just by purchasing a ticket. However, the original site of Changchun Film Studio is not located in Jingyue. After the September 18th incident, the Japanese occupied the northeast and established Manchukuo there. To consolidate their colonial rule, the Japanese established an organization called the Manchukuo Motion Picture Association in Changchun, located on Hongqi Street in Chaoyang District, north of Wutong East Lake Park. They renovated buildings, enclosed lands, produced various films, and published pictorials. The very famous Japanese female spy Li Shanglin was the lead actress of Manchukuo Motion Picture and starred in movies such as Shanghai Nights, Eternal Glory, and Suzhou Nocturne. After Japan's defeat, Li Shanglin was captured. People questioned why she, as a Chinese, made films for the Japanese. Li Shanglin replied, "You're mistaken, I'm not Chinese, I'm Japanese from Osaka." Nevertheless, people still questioned her accent, which sounded like she was from Dalian, and suspected that she might be posing as a Japanese. However, after an investigation, it was confirmed that she indeed was Japanese. Her parents were members of a pioneering group and she was born in China. To make it easier for the Chinese populace to accept her, she was given a random Chinese name, Li Shanglin, but in reality, she served to promote Japan's imperial education. After the war, Li Shanglin returned to Japan and passed away in 2014. This shows us the considerable efforts the Manchukuo Motion Picture Company put into cultural colonization at that time. After Japan's defeat, the facilities of the Manchukuo Motion Picture Company fell into Chinese hands, and it was this location that later became the Changchun Film Studio. The story I'm going to tell today took place in Changchun, 1977. Back then, the film factory operated like a food factory. Departments were clearly divided, and whether you were a photographer or a director, you had to punch in and out on time, completely different from today's freedom to shoot films at any time and place. There was a place within the factory where staff members could freely come and go, and that place is the Xiaobailu we are discussing today. The former Xiaobailu was very conspicuous in the entire factory area because the entire film studio was built on the facilities of the original Manchukuo Motion Picture. Xiaobailu was originally the private residence of Manchukuo director Nabayama Masayuki. Following Japan's surrender, as he was a fervent militarist who had politically disagreed with someone and killed their entire family, sparing not even the children, his suicide seemed to be within reason. After the Manchukuo Motion Picture became the Changchun Film Studio, how was Xiaobailu repurposed? Nowadays, it might have been converted into the director's office. But that wasn't the case at the time. The studio arranged for all screenwriters and actors to work in Xiaobailu. The rationale was straightforward. The quality of an artistic work depends on the script as its foundation and the actors as its soul. If the script is good, subpar acting can be tolerated. If the actors are outstanding, even a deficient script can be compensated for. At that time, to provide the writers and actors with a conducive creative environment. Xiao Bailu became their office, not bound by time, free to come and go as they wish. Even going out to experience life and gain inspiration was no issue, as long as they could deliver their work in the end. Screenwriters often find it difficult to produce anything during the day, with inspiration usually striking in the still of the night. I used to be like that myself. Therefore, Xiao Bailu was almost always lit throughout the night as everyone worked into the early hours. However, in recent times, whether screenwriters or actors, nobody dares to come to Xiao Bailu to work at night anymore, because there have been eyewitnesses to ghostly disturbances in the building. A while ago, an actor from the studio, Xu Lin, celebrated his birthday. Since actors' incomes are higher compared to other positions, and everyone's spirits have been lifted since the end of the Cultural Revolution, Xu Lin invited his colleagues to his house for a dinner celebration. Xu Lin was very popular, and almost all his colleagues attended that night. The sole person who didn't show was a screenwriter named Zhao Dixon, who was busy rushing to finish a script about the heroic deeds of the Chinese People's Volunteers and our Air Force during the war to resist America and aid Korea, so he couldn't attend the birthday gathering. Xu Lin complained a bit, mentioning that Zhao Dixon was usually great except for his absence at gatherings. Zhao Dixon felt somewhat embarrassed and explained that he was indeed in a rush to meet his deadline. The due date for his draft was approaching, and he told everyone to go ahead and drink as he had pressing matters, so nobody insisted any further. Thus, everyone understood his predicament and didn't say more, and they all went home. Xu Lin arranged the food, and before the banquet started, everyone commented that with everyone present except Zhao Dixon, they should drink to their heart's content and find an opportunity another day to have him treat them. The artists were generally forthright and generous, so the drinks flowed freely at the party, with people continuing to drink even after vomiting, lying down for a while and then waking to drink some more. It was around 1:30 a.m., in the middle of a sweltering summer night, with the door left wide open, when suddenly, footsteps were heard downstairs. Everyone paused for a moment, thinking it was the night patrol from the workplace. Upon opening the door, the person outside was panting heavily, urging everyone to stop drinking. The people inside were stunned. Wasn't Zhao Dixon at work? The newcomer continued, explaining that he was on duty and about to sleep when an old man knocked on his door, saying he saw the lights on in Xiao Bailu and thought someone had forgotten to turn them off, so he went up to check. The old man never expected to find Zhao Dixon lying face down on the table. He assumed Zhao was working and kept quiet. But when Zhao didn't respond, the old man discovered that Zhao had already passed away. There was no one else in the place besides Zhao Dixon. Now they were wondering what to do. Upon hearing this, everyone became anxious and hurried back to the workplace to deal with this unexpected death. According to the medical examination, Zhao Dixon had died suddenly due to overwork, which left everyone heartbroken. The workplace tried to reassure and console the staff, and during the memorial service, the leader spoke and said, "Since ancient times, loyal souls have never ceased. We should continue to work hard, and emphasize the need to accelerate the progress of film production." However, later on, Xu Lin was caught for drunk driving, and he was supposed to be the film's leading man, which now had to be recast urgently, leading to a sense of unsettlement, as Xu Lin, although never having served as a soldier, was spirited and fit the aesthetic standards of the movies of that time. Yet, in the remaining manuscripts of Zhao Dixon, the role of the protagonist was designated to another actor named Li Zuecheng. Although Li was competent, everyone knew that Xu Lin had always been the intended choice for this role. This was quite peculiar. Why had the role been changed in the last manuscript Zhao Dixon left behind just before his death? It was known that at the time, screenwriters had the authority to choose the actors. Since this was Zhao Dixon's final decision, the studio leadership, in accordance with the principle of respecting the deceased, decided to honor his choice and let Li Zuecheng take the role. However, they also decided to communicate with Xu Lin first, as it wouldn't be right to replace him without notice. They called Xu Lin for a meeting, but since that night of drinking, Xu Lin hadn't come to work, and he hadn't been seen even at Zhao Dixon's memorial service, which was quite puzzling. When someone was sent to check Xu Lin's house, they found no one had been able to enter Xu Lin's bedroom since July. It turned out that on the night everyone heard about Zhao Dixon's incident, they left Xu Lin's house in a hurry, thinking he was just heavily intoxicated and didn't attend to him. After several days with no sign of Xu Lin, it was finally discovered that he too had died in his bed. His body had already begun to decompose in the heat of summer. When this news reached the studio, all the colleagues were filled with regret. The studio had lost two talented employees in quick succession. After Xu Lin was buried, some unsettling phenomena began to surface in Xiaobailu. First, people discovered their manuscripts had been scribbled on and altered. Later, when everyone was working upstairs late at night, they could hear the sound of films being projected in the downstairs auditorium. At first, no one paid much attention, assuming it was a forgotten joke or an unattended machine. But as time went on, it became clear there was something amiss. The films that were being automatically played were the ones that Xu Lin had been scheduled to star in, and all the projected films were written by Zhao Dixon. Taking these events as isolated coincidences might not seem like much, but when all the coincidences are stacked together, it becomes quite eerie. Recently, Xiaobailu has gained an ominous reputation, and no one dares to work overtime there at night. One day, a group of visitors from out of town wanted to tour the Changchun film studio. The staff naturally gathered to greet the important visitors, and rigorous inspections were carried out inside and outside the studio. After a grand tour, the group arrived at Xiaobailu. The director described the history of Xiaobailu in detail to the visitors, explaining that it was a building from the Manchukuo period and now serves as a place for screenwriters to find inspiration, with fully equipped facilities. The first floor houses a projection hall and a rest area, while the second floor is the work area. He invited the visitors to enter the projection hall to watch a documentary about the studio. Everyone entered the projection hall, the lights dimmed, and the documentary began to play. Initially, the film played normally, but as it went on, the footage became increasingly blurry and the sound grew chaotic until nothing could be seen clearly. Only sounds were audible, including the agonized shouts of the screenwriter, Zhao Dixon. To outsiders unaware of the circumstances, it might have seemed like a peculiar presentation, but those from the studio recognized the voice as Li Zuechang's. Finally, an old voice came through, "I am the manager, and in early July, I inadvertently witnessed Li Zuechang commit a crime. Due to direct conflicts for various reasons, I hereby submit the footage and recordings of that day, hoping for a fair handling to restore peace to the studio." This sudden revelation stunned everyone. They all knew there was a significant issue at the studio. The studio leadership quickly looked into Li Zuechang's whereabouts, finding out he was at an Air Force base experiencing life to get into character for his role. The leaders sensed trouble and immediately called the military district, instructing them not to let Li Zuechang leave. By the time the call was made, Li had already boarded the plane, claiming he wanted to experience the combat state of a pilot. Upon learning of the situation over the phone, the military district acted swiftly, deploying 3 fighter jets to forcibly intercept the plane before takeoff. They removed Li Zuechang from the plane and searched him, finding a handgun hidden at his lower back. What exactly happened was still under investigation. During interrogation, it was ultimately revealed that Li Zuechang had planned to defect to Taiwan. Some questioned the feasibility of such a plan, arguing that defecting from Changchun to Taiwan seemed implausible due to the great distance. However, pilot defections from mainland China to Taiwan were not uncommon, especially from the late 1970s to the early 1990s. With over 30 cases recorded. Taiwan had broadcasts specifically aimed at guiding pilots on routes and maneuvers so that the Taiwanese military could identify defectors. For pilots along the southeast coast, heading straight south was a straightforward option. But for pilots from the northeast and North China, defection was more challenging due to the distance involved, which increased the risk of being shot down mid-journey. There was, however, another method, flying to South Korea first, since South Korea had diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Once pilots reached South Korea, they were relatively safe and could expect arrangements for a change of clothes, refueling, and then travel to Taiwan. Influenced by such broadcasts, Li Zuechang longed for the wealth and glory that awaited in Taiwan. Coincidentally, the studio was filming a movie about the Air Force, which he saw as an opportunity to become an actor and thereby gain access to an aircraft. In the air, he believed, everything would be much easier. He first approached the screenwriter Zhao Dixon to participate in the film. Upon being rejected, he plotted a series of crimes. While Xu Lin's birthday party was underway, Li created an alibi by pretending to be drunk, then returned to the workplace and murdered Zhao Dixon. During his escape, Li encountered Xu Lin, who was about to urinate, and resolutely murdered him as well and placed the body in the bedroom. Thus, the entire truth was laid bare. If not for the accidental encounter with old Zhang that day, Li Zuechang might have successfully escaped. The studio leaders lamented that old Zhang had spared the country a great loss and deserved a reward. When asked about old Jiang's whereabouts, no one seemed to know. It was only later discovered that old Zhang had passed away on the 1st of July that year. As to whether old Jiang's spirit helped solve the case, that is difficult to ascertain. Since then, no one has worked in Xiaobailu. Nowadays, Xiaobailu still stands in the Changchun film studio. But it has been transformed into a museum, chronicling the steadfast history of New China amidst adversity. And that is where our story for tonight ends.